Living in the future through expectation. The reality that I've seen in the ministry is that often our expectations are just not realistic. They're crazy. There's some things that I've heard sitting in this chair that make absolutely no sense. I mean, we talk about faith, but sometimes we're talking some Disneyland faith, some extraterrestrial faith, some fantasy faith, some stuff that just doesn't make sense. And then you got Christians who believe in stuff that is really whacked out, and they live in the future expecting these crazy things, and they miss out on the opportunities that they're having today that could actually get them moving forward. Now, I am not saying that God cannot do the impossible. I am very aware all things are possible to him who believes. I am also not trying to put any limitations on God. However, before you criticize me, let me just give you some of the stuff that I've heard. I once had a brother who came in this office and started telling me that he was praying and the Holy Spirit revealed to him that he was going to have his own TV station. I'm not talking about having a channel or a show. His own TV station. This guy's in his 20s. He lives in the basement of his mother's house. He's not studying media, and you're going to have a TV station? I mean, this is just nonsense. And now what are you going to do? While you're in the basement, you're going to have your hands up, praising God, waiting for a TV station to appear out of nowhere? This is unrealistic expectations that make no sense. This has nothing to do with faith. This is fantasy. It just doesn't hold. Or the guy whose business is falling apart. You haven't had a client for 3 weeks. And what are you saying? Saying, oh, you know what? I know I have no clients. I know I haven't paid the rent. I know that they're saying that they're going to come and seize my equipment. But the Holy Spirit spoke to me. And he told me clients are coming. As a matter of fact, when I was praying, I saw eagles. And the eagles were dropping clients. I saw them appearing in front of my store. And I thank God and I can't wait for them to come. But yet, in the now moment, are you doing any advertising? Are you going and see anybody? Are you making any phone calls? What are you doing to go and get the clients? You see, the problem with us as Christians, especially, is that we have such a misconception of our faith, that our faith brings us in a place where we expect God to do something, and we do nothing in the present moment. And this will destroy you. To just expect things to happen without doing anything to trigger them is foolishness. Listen, there is what I call exaggerated expectations that people have of God. One of the biggest ones that we see is this. If God said it, it's going to go perfectly. God said it, it's going to go well. Has the Lord spoken to you? If he has, all will go well with you. Well, I have an issue with that because the Bible tells us in Acts chapter 13 and verse 2, God says, I put aside Paul and Barnabas for the work which I called them to do. So God calls Paul and Barnabas to do a work. What was the work that God called Paul and Barnabas to do? Because it's God who said it. So the work was to go out and to go preach. Now the problem is this. They go out and preach, and in the first place that Paul goes, they get opposed. In the second place that he goes, he gets beaten up. In the third place that he goes, he gets put in jail. In the fourth place he goes, he gets stoned. Imagine if Paul had said, if God spoke to us, it's going to be perfect. There's going to be no problems. Imagine if this was Paul's expectation. Then as soon as he would have had the first problem, then Paul should have looked at Barnabas and said, Barnabas, I don't know. Is it God who really called us to go and preach? I think we should go back to Antioch because if this is God, it should go perfectly. But you see, that would have been an unrealistic expectation. God called them, but although God called them, it doesn't mean that it was going to go perfect. But the calling was from God. See, it's like the girl who says, you know what? I've been praying, and this guy, Ricky, he's my soulmate. He is the boy that God created for me. He is the perfect man. And so you really believe now that Ricky boy is going to come in your life and he's going to be the perfect husband. And now, if ever you argue, it's the end of the world. God, he's my soulmate. How could he be arguing with me? This is unrealistic, foolish, Disneyland, nonsense, stupidity, faith. How can you believe that the guy is going to be perfect? This makes no sense. A perfect guy doesn't exist. A perfect woman doesn't exist. Your expectation to expect that to just be perfect, it makes no sense. Listen, it's going to be like somebody opening up a restaurant and saying, God is going to give me the clients, but you don't do any promotion. You can have expectations, but you cannot miss the now moment. You see, the problem with us isn't what we're expecting. The problem is how we are expecting it. This is the problem. It's how. How is God going to do it? Let's look at some biblical examples of men who dreamed, men who expected the impossible, men who had great faith, but they didn't live in the future through their expectations. They maximized their present moment. Abraham. God calls Abraham, and God says to Abraham, Abraham, I'm calling you to leave everything and go to a land that I'm going to show you, and I'm going to make your name great. God says to Abraham, I'm going to multiply you so much that the earth is going to be filled with your descendants. Now, when God says this to Abraham, Abraham is, I think, 74 years old, and Abraham doesn't even have one kid. And you know, although God gives this promise to Abraham in his old age, and it's impossible for Sarah, his wife, to conceive, she's never had a kid, they evidently have a problem that is not allowing them to have kids. Although God speaks to this in his old age, the child only comes 25 years later. Now my question is this, for 25 years, what did Abraham do? Did Abraham just sit there and say, God, I know you're gonna give me a son. Oh God, I know you're gonna do it. I know you're gonna have a promise for me. Oh God, I know it. No. Although Abraham was expecting a son, it didn't stop him from becoming rich. It didn't stop him from raising his own private army. It didn't stop him from acquiring land in the promised land. Abraham, for 25 years, seized every opportunity that was in front of him. And during those 25 years, he didn't have his son. It didn't stop him from seizing the now moment. Imagine if Abraham had stopped living and he says, you know what? Until I get my son, I'm not going to do nothing. This would have been the worst mistake. Because you see, what happened is that because Abraham maximized his 25 years, when Isaac did come, Abraham had all kinds of wealth to transfer into his hands. So it would have been unrealistic for Abraham to just think about having this kid without doing something in the now. Let me give